If all your value propositions and all your positioning was around, here's how we're going to help you grow. And then all of a sudden the companies are like, well, actually, we're just more interested in saving money. You might have to radically change your positioning to continue to be relevant to these companies that have completely different priorities than what they did before.
Hello and welcome to the Product People podcast. Here we learn from the most amazing people in the product space for 30 minutes at a time. My name is João Moita and today we bring you the highlights of a conversation with April Dunford, hosted by Alex, Group Product Manager at Product People, and recorded live at one of our community events. April Dunford is a highly experienced product marketer and consultant who has led marketing and product teams at a series of successful startups. She has specialized in product launches and she now focuses on positioning for B2B tech companies. April is also the author of the bestseller Obviously Awesome, which explains her thinking on positioning and provides a methodology for positioning products. At Product People, our mission is to help companies discover and deliver great products faster. We do that by doing hands-on product management work at companies of all sizes, and also by sharing knowledge generously with our community of more than 20,000 product enthusiasts. To find out more about us and access our community, check our website, getproductpeople.com, or head over to our YouTube, LinkedIn, or Meetup pages. You can find all the links in the episode description. Now I leave you with Alex and April. I hope you enjoyed this episode.
In the past, as a normal IC, when talking with product marketers or the marketing department, I was always wondering, how can I help with that? What are our touch points? How can we make sure we work hand in hand together?
When we think about we're going to do positioning, I don't see the act of positioning as something that marketing necessarily owns. And in fact, I think this is best done as a team project. So in the work that I do with companies, when we're going to investigate the positioning and look at it, typically I've got a cross-functional team that includes marketing, sales, product, customer success, and the founders, the CEOs in the room, and anybody else we think we need. And we're going to work through a process to figure out what the positioning should be. Now, there are key parts of that process that I think only product really has the answer. So we typically start with a discussion around, we need to figure out what we're positioning against. So if we didn't exist in the market, what would a customer do? And the answer to that question is, well, they'd either do the status quo, whatever that is, and it might be manual processes or using a spreadsheet or hiring an intern or using some legacy software. Or, once they decide, well, we got to get off of that, they might make a short list of things. And then I can look at that short list and see, well, who else ends up on the short list with us? So that's my stake in the ground. I have to beat that in order to win in the market. Now, if I've got a cross-functional team together, it's interesting. The product team knows a lot about competitors and competitive capabilities, typically. Sales knows a lot about who actually makes it onto the short list. Okay. And sales knows a lot about what the status quo is in the account, because typically we're fighting against that in sales. But if I really want to do this well, I need both things to come together. I need the input from product and I need the input from sales. When I get to the next step of positioning, the next step is, well, what do we got that the alternatives don't have, capabilities wise, feature function wise? And product knows this better than anybody else, certainly better than the sales team, certainly better than marketing does. So I can't actually figure that out without the product people in the room. Then we get to the next step, which is okay, here's the big list of capabilities that are differentiated. How do I translate those capabilities into value? And when I'm doing that exercise, product, if they've got a lot of customer facing experience, they know a lot about what's valuable and what isn't to a prospect. Sales obviously understands this. They know what sells and what doesn't. Marketing, same thing. We know what gets people excited and what doesn't get people excited. So, then I'll move to the next thing, which is okay, I've got this differentiated value. The question then becomes, well, who cares a lot about that value? And what is my definition of a best fit customer? Again, different parts of the organization have different view of the customer across the journey to be able to answer that. And then the last one's, what's the market we're going to win? So in my opinion, marketing trying to do that on their own would just be stupid. And you would not get nearly as good a result as you would if you had product and sales and customer success, and ideally CEO, founders, or whoever the business owner is together in the room. If we want to get to really good positioning, that is a cross-functional effort, and it absolutely fails without product involvement.
Oh, that's awesome to hear. A lot of PMs are becoming PMs because they love the bigger picture. They love to contribute. Us and I see in some sort of circle. We have that with continuously discovery habits like the product trio. Now you mentioned basically this positioning pentagon, maybe even. So that's awesome to hear that PMs are of value also in this discipline. Thank you for sharing that. How do you assess if the positioning is right? How do you capture that on first glimpse or after some short observation?
So back when I was a VP marketing, when I was in-house, I'd show up, I get hired as the VP marketing at a startup. And so I show up and everybody's like, great, brand new VP marketing. Let's get going on some lead generation, step your foot on the gas and let's just generate all kinds of leads and see the revenue go up. And my experience was if we poured too much money and effort into lead generation without understanding whether or not the positioning was good, we were often in trouble because we would essentially be throwing water into a leaky bucket if the positioning was weak. And so usually the first 2-3 weeks I would arrive at a company, I would be trying to assess, do we have a positioning issue? And if so, how are we going to fix it? And so there's a lot of ways I think you could assess that. I was always working at B2B companies, and we typically had a sales force. So the easiest way to tell whether or not your positioning is working is to sit in on a bunch of sales calls. Ideally, a first substantial sales call, not a qualifying call, but a first substantial sales call. So here's what it's like when the positioning's not working. Your rep gets on the call, they do this great job, they're describing what the product is and all the great stuff that it does. And you'll get a certain part of the way through the call and you can see the customer going, back up. So what are you again? Start back from the beginning. Go back I'm not sure I really got it. And so you'll hear that a lot. The other thing you'll get is the customer will get, again, about halfway through or a quarter way through, and prospect will be like, oh, yeah, I get what you are. You're just like Salesforce. And you're nothing like Salesforce. And then the rep will be like, no, that's not it. No, let's back up. Or you'll get this one sometimes where the customer will say, yeah, I get it. I don't get why anybody would pay for that. So they think they understand it, but for some reason they just don't understand the value. And so if you've got a product that's in market, you have happy customers that renew with you, that love your stuff, that recommend you to others. But there's something going on that these new prospects coming in, getting all the way through to a first sales call, just aren't getting it. That difference between what a happy existing customer knows and what a new prospect on a first sales call knows, that gap is positioning. If your positioning is weak, it's going to torpedo your metrics all the way across, right? The entire funnel is kind of messed up, right? So you'll get this thing that nobody wants to interact with your marketing because they don't get it and they don't understand it. Or worse, you're attracting the wrong kind of prospects because they think they get it, but it's not actually the thing that they think that it is, right? So you'll get these poorly qualified, not good fit prospects getting into sales, and then they're kind of confused through the sales. And a certain number of them won't actually figure it out, but your rep's doing a great job selling them. So they'll close the deal, they'll get it, and then they'll get using it and go, what? This is what I thought it was. And then they churn out on you. So your metrics are bad all the way across. So you end up having to rely on a bunch of kind of less quantitative indicators. But the way I look at it is, when in doubt, let's just back up and go through an exercise and see what we get. If we get to the same place, then maybe the positioning is as good as it's going to get, but at least we looked at it. Most companies do not position deliberately. They're positioning by, it's the same positioning we had since the founder invented the thing. And we're still using that same positioning, and nobody's ever taken a step back and said, is calling this thing email really the best we can do? Or maybe this is positioned better as chat or team collaboration or something else. But we've never actually sat down and done an exercise to kind of look at it and see, like, are we all clear on what our differentiated value is? Do we really have a good tight definition of what a good fit customer is? And if we haven't done that exercise, even if we think the positioning is pretty good, there's probably value in doing that.
Thank you. Thank you. So giving recent experiences with pandemic, which shock actually up the norms, right? Like everything was questioned, like remote, not remote. How can companies sell and market, etc.? Nobody's going on the street anymore. Nobody sees the billboards. And what can companies take away and learn about positioning strategies for the future when things which you thought are not possible are basically possible?
This is a great question because, I used to talk to people about this idea that positioning is not carved in stone. We don't just set the positioning and then forget about it and it's going to be that forever. Like the reality is, your product does not stay the same. And so your differentiated value is changing, but your competitors don't stay the same either. And then sometimes we have these big outside forces that can really change a customer's priority, and we'll have to react to that. So I used to talk about that and people would say, well, give me an example of a big outside force. I used to say a change in government regulations, like that used to be the most common one. Pandemic is interesting in that the immediate effects of that were very different depending on what your market was and who your customers were. And sometimes it was, I'm really trying to pursue some growth because there's real growth opportunities. Sometimes it was, well, how are we going to survive a pandemic when none of our customers are buying anymore? When we think about value propositions for our products, in general, typically in B2B, we have two choices. Like if I abstract my value proposition out to as abstract as it can get, basically all B2B products are either helping you make money or helping you save money. Like that's kind of all we got. And typically the wisdom goes like in a boom, when things are going well and the economy is good, most of your customers will be focused on growth. They'll be trying to figure out how to grow. And so this value proposition of makes money is always stronger than the value proposition of, oh, I'm going to help you save a couple of bucks. But when we go into a recession, and I've seen this across various recessions we've had in the past, what can happen is that your customers can be under financial pressure suddenly. And so suddenly the overall objectives of the company can switch from grow to, man, we should just be really conscious of what we're spending because we're in the middle of a moment here where growth isn't exactly possible. And what we really need to do is just survive. So all of a sudden, this saves money sounds better than making money because, let's be realistic, we're not making money. If all your value propositions and all your positioning was around, here's how we're going to help you grow. And then all of a sudden the companies are like, well, actually, we're just more interested in saving money. You might have to radically change your positioning to continue to be relevant to these companies that have completely different priorities than what they did before. What you really want to be doing is checking in with your customers to see how they're feeling about their prospects and what their priorities are so that you can have a bit of an early warning if you need to shift them.
Understood. That's an awesome answer. This is like super important. I think my own company failed because we had the wrong positioning, and I should have taken this advice 5 years ago. But when we talk now about this positioning, can a company have two positions basically? Because I see like there are clients who thrive in the crisis, and some companies also have clients who then suffer in crisis. Can you have then two positions and you play each card? Yeah.
I'll tell you, it's very difficult to kind of hold these two different positions for any sustained amount of time. So typically what we have is if we've got a product and we've got, our positioning and it works for one segment, but it doesn't work for the other, but we think that's a temporary thing because maybe it's COVID or maybe there's a thing happening or maybe a new regulation popped up and we want to chase that, but we don't actually want to change the positioning of the product for that reason because we think it's a short-term thing. typically how we'll handle that in marketing is we'll keep the positioning the same, but we'll run campaigns with this other positioning only directed at that one subsegment of the market. If we think this is a longer term thing, though, eventually I've got two products because
Mm.
what these people want in the product is not the same as what these people want in the product. And so
Mm.
if you're a small company and you can't serve both of these indefinitely, then typically what it means is you're going to have to pick one to focus on. And, I'll focus on this one because it looks the most attractive. It's the easiest to get revenue. And I'll come back to these other folks later. If you're a big company, typically what happens is you end up forking the product and it ends up being two different products. And I've got this product for this audience and this product for this audience. Or I'll do something tricky like I have the same base product, but I got 3 add-ons for these folks and 3 add-ons for these folks, which substantially change it. And that's how I'm going to serve the different needs. The issue of having two completely separate positioning for one product is eventually it gets you into trouble. Like when we go to prioritize features, these people want different things than these people. And so how are we going to do that? And what you don't want is I prioritized a mishmash of things and now neither one of them like my stuff anymore.
We could go down the rabbit hole on this, but we have a question that goes in a different direction. What's your definition of an ideal client profile ICP?
So here's how I look at that. I'm coming at this with a real positioning lens. So what I see a lot of companies doing is very aspirational ICP definitions. They'll say, we want to sell to Fortune 500. That's not where we're selling today, but we want to sell the Fortune 500. And, and maybe your product just doesn't work for Fortune 500. Maybe you don't have a way to actually do deals with Fortune 500 companies. So in my perspective, when we're talking about positioning is always all about how do I have the best possible story around why a certain kind of customer is a really good fit for my product. What's the value I can deliver for a certain kind of customer? Why should they pick me over the other folks? So in my mind, when I'm thinking about who's my best fit customer, by definition, my best fit customer is a customer that for some reason really, really cares about the value that only my product can deliver. So the way we get at that in my positioning methodology is we'll start with competitive comparables, right? So we'll say, look, like who do I have to beat? Like what comparison is the customer doing? And then I look at, well, what capabilities that I have that the comparable does not? And then I translate that to value and say, look, I can do this for your business. I can do this for your business and I can do this for your business. And no one else can give you that combination of things. And then the question is, well, who cares a lot about those things? And what I should be able to do is I should be able to look at that and say, well, these are the kinds of companies that care about this stuff because, their business model looks like this, because they have these 3 other software products, because this is the way they make money and other companies aren't like that. So ideally, what I should have, my differentiated value should actually drive my ideal customer profile that I say, look, like this is what I can do that no one else can. My ideal customer is a customer that really cares about that. What I see a lot of companies doing is the opposite. They'll start with the customer that they want to have, and then they'll do this big investigation into what are their problems and whatever. And then they'll say, well, this is the value that would really resonate with them. And it becomes completely divorced from product and what your product can actually do. So by definition, that ideal customer profile is going to change over time because your product's going to change, because your value proposition is going to change. But in my mind, if we're asking the question about right now, not in the future, right now, what I got to do is look at, well, what's my differentiated value? And then who cares a lot about that? That's how I solve that.
Thank you. Can you describe, like when we talk about the value and users, the clients care about the value of your product, is this the decision maker? Is this the other company's value or like shared understanding of value which needs to match? Or is it just the person you sell to?
Yeah. So I get questions about this a lot because, like, in particular, marketers in my opinion, spend too much time on persona work. And so here's the way a B2B deal gets done. Typically, if we're selling to businesses, there are typically 5 people inside a company that have influence on a deal. So you're never just selling to one person. There's like, typically what we have is we'll have what we refer to as sort of the lead person on the deal. This is the person that usually what you'll have is an economic buyer. Like, let's say you've got the VP sales as the economic buyer, and the VP sales says, John, go find us a CRM. And John says, oh shit, I have to find a CRM. And then John, Googles around and tries to figure out how to make a short list and whatever. But when he's doing the evaluation, at some point, the end user salespeople will get involved and maybe have veto ability and say, we hate this one or we love it. We'll get involved at some point and they'll say, oh, this doesn't fit with our existing IT, whatever. You might even get like security or procurement or legal, like there'd be all these other people involved. So when we think about positioning, and now granted, this is just for positioning, in a deal, a complex deal like that, typically there is someone that is the champion of that deal. And typically that's the person that got given the assignment, go figure out what we should buy. And so that person's job in a B2B deal is to, first of all, make a short list. Secondly, do the evaluation across the short list. And then thirdly, to get consensus across all these other people that have a say about this thing. And so we can refer to that person as the champion in the deal. When it comes to positioning is very, very important to getting you on the short list. Because if people can't figure out what you are, what your value is, whatever, you don't even get it on the short list. And so we need our positioning to really resonate for that champion. Otherwise, we don't even get a crack at the deal. So this champion persona, whoever it might be, it's really super important to really understand who is that champion, because you need your positioning to really sing for that person. Now, once you've got a deal in motion, so let's say you're on the short list, we're going through the evaluation, we're doing demos, maybe we're even doing a proof of concept and all that stuff. My job then becomes, I have to arm that champion to sell everyone else. Which is really not a question of positioning. It's really more a question of, can the champion articulate the value or handle the objections of the other parties? And so if it's IT, I might need to be very careful that I'm arming that champion with like, look, we're going to integrate just fine with your accounting system. We'll integrate with HR, no problem. We'll come and do the meeting with IT for you. Because often IT is just a checklist of reasons to say no, rather than caring about the value of the solution at all. When it comes to end users, typically we have to arm the champion there as well, right? Whereas we're saying, look, we're going to do training. Here's how we're going to get the end users on board. Here's what end users love about our stuff. They might not see it right away, but here's how you pitch this to the end user. And so I'm arming them. But if I'm thinking about like straight up positioning, how I position this thing on the website, I am very, very concerned with this champion in the deal. And I can, once I've actually made it onto a short list and I got a deal going, then I can worry about how do I arm the champion to sell to everybody else. So that's how I look at that persona stuff. Like everybody's like, they view this persona thing and they're like, John is 36 years old and he's married and he has whatever. And I'm like, what I really need to know is how sensitive is he to certain things that might affect this deal? Like, is John security conscious? Does John worry about security or not? Right? Does John, how big is his budget? I'd like to know that. I think we often get distracted into a bunch of things that are maybe not so relevant. So here's the other thing I'll tell you. There's a really big difference between what I would call a considered purchase and an unconsidered purchase. So people will sometimes ask me, what's the difference between positioning for B2B and positioning for B2C? And I don't actually see the split that way. Where I see the split is considered versus unconsidered. So unconsidered is like, I'm buying a pack of gum. right? I walk into the store, and what matters a lot more is what gum is in front of me. And then I'm just going to pick one. And maybe I pick it because I know the name. Maybe I pick it because I had it before. Or maybe I just pick it because I'm bored. I'll pick something new. And the stakes are low. Like if I picked the wrong one, no big deal. I wasted $1. It's no big. Yeah, I just won't pick that one again. And so I think positioning matters a lot less in these situations, certainly a lot less than distribution does. And, and maybe your branding matters a lot more. If I've heard of this and I think I kind of remember this thing. Okay, fine, I'll buy this thing. Now, if it's a considered purchase, that's different. A considered purchase, there are stakes. So, and that can be a B2C thing. Like if I'm buying a car, I don't just buy the first car. I don't just see an ad on TV and go, oh my gosh, that's the one I'm buying, that. I go and I look around because it's a big purchase. There's stakes here. I don't want to waste $30,000, $50,000 on a car that I'm going to hate. Maybe my spouse is going to be mad about it. Maybe my kids are going to be sitting in the back seat complaining, right? So I go and I'll make a short list. And then I'll look at the pros and cons of the short list and I'll talk to a salesperson, and I won't go to just one. I'll go to 2 or 3. And so in those situations, your positioning matters a lot because it matters whether or not you're going to get on that short list. And it matters how much people really understand what is the differentiated value of this thing. And is it a fit for me and my situation? And so I think people get really bent out of shape with image stuff and brand and a lot of things that it's not that they're not important in B2B. They are, but they are so much more important in an unconsidered purchase. But the way we buy toothpaste is not at all like the way we buy an accounting program. It's really different. And so the stakes are different. The people involved are different. Everything's different. And I think the impact of some of these things, like I see people trying to take these concepts from consumer packaged goods marketing and try to apply them when I'm selling a database. And I'm like, it's different over here. The way we do stuff is different.
Thank you. Again, great answer. What is the most common mistake of repositioning? So basically, a company positions themselves, figured out, maybe it doesn't really work out, not the expected business outcome here. And how do you go about it? What are key mistakes here you often see?
Yeah. So one of the big things when companies reposition is, so there's a handful. So one is they will attempt to reposition for what they wish the product was instead of what the product actually is. So they'll be positioning around some future version of the product that actually doesn't exist yet. And that's always bad because you're essentially overpromising, or you're promising something to clients that your product can't actually deliver on. So that's a common one. And I see it a lot in startups because, the founders of startups are often living quite far in the future, but positioning needs to be really rooted in what can you do today? Why buy this thing today? Because people are not giving you today's money for tomorrow's product. Like, I can only buy what's on the truck right now. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, I think when folks are doing a repositioning, they don't tend to bring the right people to the table to really understand what is actually happening in a purchase process right now. So sometimes people will do this positioning exercise and treat it like a bit of a theoretical exercise. So, when I look at folks that fall into this trap, they'll give me a list of competitors and they'll say, these are all my competitors. And there'll be like 15 competitors. And they'll say, then the way we're different is ease of use. Like all these ones take 29 clicks to do a thing, but ours only takes 1. And therefore, the value we can do is save you time on something or to make it easier to use. But then when you scratch at that, because there wasn't sales in the room, or we didn't really think about how companies buy, if you scratch at it and you say, well, do you actually lose deals to these folks? And sometimes you'll get this answer like, no, we don't lose deals to that. And I said, well, what do you lose deal to? They say, oh, we lose a deal to no decision, which actually means you lost the deal to the spreadsheet. Right. And here's you saying, oh, you should pick us because we're easier to use, but you're not easier to use than the spreadsheet. If you don't get the right people together in the room, if a salesperson is sitting there, you can ask the salesperson and say, do any of these companies show up on a short list? And if the answer is no, you don't have to worry about positioning against them. I will if they show up on a short list at some point, then I'll start worrying about it. But if customers don't know about them, I don't have to position against them. Like, we need everybody to come together so that we can get at the reality of how customers buy right now. The other mistake is not considering the status quo as a competitor. And so we'll get so bent out of shape trying to position against the one or two competitors we have, but meanwhile, we're losing half our deals to no decision, which means we're not doing a very good job positioning against status quo, and we need to factor that into our positioning.
Awesome. This was very, very valuable. Yeah, April, thank you very much. Thanks
Thanks so much. Thanks so much for having me. This was great.
Thank you for listening to this Product People podcast episode. To check the full conversation with video and to see the talks from other guests, head over to our YouTube page. The next episode will feature Petra Wheel, author of Strong Product People. Make sure to follow our show on your favorite podcast app so that you don't miss it. See you next time.